General George C. Marshall, the architect who outlived the army he built. George C. Marshall spent his life doing what almost no one else could, turning chaos into order. He was the kind of leader who held a country together, even when it didn't realize it needed holding. But after World War II, his life didn't slow down. It got heavier. He was sent to China to negotiate peace between the nationalists and communists, a political nightmare. He returned exhausted. Then he was appointed Secretary of State, then Secretary of Defense. Then he was called out of retirement again to fix a military that was slipping into Cold War confusion. And each time, he said yes. His body didn't. By the late 1950s, Marshall was a man held together more by duty than by strength. He had heart issues, circulation problems, and the beginnings of neurological decline. Then came the stroke on October 16, 1959. It hit him hard, harder than any battle he planned, any crisis he solved, any war he shaped. Within hours, the man who had once overseen millions could barely move or speak. What made it tragic wasn't just the physical loss, it was the silence. Marshall was the voice behind the largest mobilization in U.S. history, and suddenly, he couldn't form words at all. He lived for several months in a world where his mind outpaced his body, but couldn't express itself. Doctors treated him. Dignitaries visited him. Newspapers speculated about him. Marshall faded from the world slowly, one function at a time. He died on October 16, 1959, the same date of his stroke, at 78. The architect of victory left this life not through violence, but through the slow, relentless collapse of a body that had served far too long. General Douglas MacArthur, the warrior who couldn't fight, his final enemy. MacArthur's life was a storm. Medals, controversy, applause, anger, and myth. But after Korea, when Truman fired him, he entered the strangest chapter of his life. Quiet. People expected theatrics from MacArthur. But his final years were calm, reflective, almost unsettlingly peaceful for a man who once commanded an ocean-sized battlefield. What most people don't know is that MacArthur spent those years in physical decline. His arteries were hardening. His kidneys were shutting down. He was retaining fluid. His blood pressure was climbing to dangerous levels. In early 1964, he collapsed at home and was rushed to Walter Reed Army Medical Center. Doctors performed emergency surgery to save him. They succeeded, temporarily. His body didn't cooperate. Infection set in. His kidneys stopped filtering. Fluid filled his lungs. He underwent 2 more operations, each one leaving him weaker. The man who had survived artillery barrages, ambushes, political wars, and 2 global conflicts was dying from the quiet failure of his organs. He reportedly remained conscious through much of it, aware, proud, unbroken, even as his body failed him. MacArthur died on April 5, 1964, at 84. His last major public appearance had been years earlier, delivering his famous "Old Soldiers Never Die" speech. And in the end, his death lived up to that line. Nothing dramatic, no theatrics, just an old soldier fading away. General Dwight D. Eisenhower, the supreme commander, worn down by his own heart. Eisenhower's final years were a slow-motion battle against a heart that had been burning at both ends for decades. As president, the stress nearly killed him, literally. His first heart attack came in 1955. Then he had surgery for intestinal blockage. Then he had a stroke. Then another heart attack. And after leaving office, the pressure didn't stop. Presidents called him for advice. Generals sought his opinion. Foreign leaders wanted his guidance. Americans viewed him as a living compass, a person who understood crises better than anyone alive. But his heart couldn't carry the weight anymore. In 1968, he suffered another devastating heart attack. He survived, barely, and spent the next 9 months in the hospital. 9 months, hooked up to machines, doctors adjusting medications daily, family members rotating through the room. Eisenhower had spent his life moving armies across continents, but in the end, he could barely move down the hallway of his hospital wing. His heart simply stopped working on March 28, 1969, at age 78. His funeral was massive, fitting for a man who once commanded the largest military coalition ever assembled. But the truth is, Eisenhower died the way many soldiers fear, slowly, watching strength slip away day by day, knowing exactly what was coming. General Henry Hap Arnold. The airman burned out before his time. Arnold wasn't killed by combat. He was killed by ambition, his own. He was a chain smoker, a workaholic, and a man who slept even less during wartime than he did in peacetime. He had heart attacks during the war and ignored them. When doctors ordered rest, he refused it. When his body begged for downtime, he pushed harder. By 1945, his heart was damaged beyond repair. He retired early, but retirement didn't mean rest. He kept consulting, kept advising, kept designing the future of air power. He helped shape nuclear strategy, jet propulsion programs, and early missile development. But every meeting, every paper, every late night added weight his heart couldn't carry. In January 1950, Arnold collapsed at home. He was rushed to the hospital, but there was nothing left for doctors to fix. His heart simply couldn't beat strongly enough to sustain him anymore. He died at just 63, decades younger than his peers. He lived fast, burned bright, and paid the price for it. Arnold didn't just help invent modern air power. He gave up years of his own life doing it. General Omar Bradley, the last 5-star general to fall. Bradley watched the world change in ways none of the others lived to see. He watched the civil rights movement rise. He watched Vietnam escalate. He watched nuclear strategy evolve. He watched the Army shrink, reorganize, and modernize. He watched the memory of World War II fade from something people lived to something people learned. And he watched every other 5-star general die. By the late 1970s, Bradley was old, frail, and struggling with numerous health issues, circulatory problems, poor vision, declining hearing, and eventually a stroke that left him partially incapacitated. He lived long enough to see himself become a historical relic, the last of a rank America would never award again. His death in 1981 at age 88 closed the book on the highest rank any American has ever held. When Bradley died, the era of 5-star leadership didn't just end, it became history. There has never been another. Why? Their deaths still matter. When people look at 5-star generals, they see rank, they see medals, they see strategy, victories, wars. What they don't see is the cost. These men didn't die peacefully because they didn't live peacefully. They lived at a level of pressure modern officers will never experience again. Marshall lost his speech. MacArthur lost his strength. Eisenhower lost his heart. Arnold lost his life early. Bradley lost his world. One friend at a time. There will never be another American 5-star general. Not because we don't have talented leaders, but because the world will never again demand someone carry that kind of weight. Their final battles were quiet, painful, drawn out, and in many ways more human than anything they ever did in uniform. They defeated empires in life, but death defeated them the same way it defeats all of us, slowly, inevitably, without rank or privilege.